All right, today we're going to do is a still life painting, and I look at this painting every single day. I think it is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm going to do a little version of it because the format's slightly different, but it is what it is, and I mean it's up to you how deep into getting everything perfect you want, but sometimes I just have this sense of wanting to jump into something and study it, especially when you're motivated. So if you're a perfectionist, maybe try to not be a perfectionist for a bit, and then go for just painting. All right, so let's start here. I'm gonna just mass it in, and for me, these are also just a great way to kind of take and think about different ways of working. So on a small study like this, you're more than welcome to try out different techniques, and this is more of like a direct technique. I'm not going to care all that much about the drawing, but you know, I don't think you have to as well. But what I'm going to do is we're going to study it. That's really what the essence of even like a poster study in an atelier, the way in which we were taught was to study the big picture and the way in which everything comes together in the study of the light on the forms. So this is a great way to just begin to think about shapes, how to see shapes in a design, and then really dissect shapes and composition. I mean, it's so much about poster studies. There's so much positivity coming out of them, and that's what I'd recommend. So I'm going to just get that in there. And the thing is, it also teaches me to just be bold and live with the decision. You know, one of the things I had to overcome when painting was just this idea that everything had to be perfect. And then I realized I don't think it really does. You know, accuracy I think sometimes gets in the way of expression. How do you have accuracy and expression at the same time? And, you know, I think training with accuracy in mind is a great way to guide you, and then from there you kind of leave it, but then you can get back to it if you need to. So hopefully it doesn't sound too confusing, but you know, what I'm going to just be doing here is, again, trying to get the accuracy of the composition about so that the elements are kind of in the right spot. And think of this almost like an athlete going in to work on their craft and routine. It's not about perfection. So let me make that smaller, actually, now that this is kind of coming together. You know, you can see that was bigger, and now I'm just going to get these shapes, just going to look at the interaction there of this as it comes down, and corral this into the similarities that I see. All right, so then there's something over here, and again, as I put it back together, I'm studying it. I will have obviously a slightly different composition than her composition, because you know, I don't have the exact same format. So if you have to do something like that, and it's the only way it'll make sense to you, then by all means find out what the proportion is. What I try to avoid is doing the same exact size. All right, so let's jump into the color here. So not only am I composing and thinking about composition in terms of like elements of the design, I want to also talk about color as well, because color is a component of composing. It's not like its own separate thing in which we're just rendering things. It's also considered in terms of like why you would put a color in the painting at that spot. And that's why I chose this one, because you know, you can see that the artist was very conscious of color and color choices and contrast, really, in this. If we were to think about the traditional color wheel, I think they're really thinking about that when we're looking at it. So I'm going to begin to kind of add to the palette here. I sometimes just have random palettes that I'll try, and this one seems a little bit, I don't know if I should say random. This is a palette that I was painting something on that was, you know, sometimes I'll just grab whatever the heck is around me and then build colors and then see if you can do things. there's nothing wrong, of course, with consistency, but there's also nothing wrong with kind of seeing what a different brush will do. So this is a Legion flat, number 4. Feel free to, of course, follow along and do the same. So I'm going to just start with something that's pretty simple at the beginning here. White is always nice and simple. I'm going to just drag that down, and let's just do a little bit of a wipe out. Grab a little bit of mineral spirits and just wipe it so I get the kind of average of where the shape can be for the white. Again, it doesn't have to be, well, you know what, I'm going to do a little of the background, and then I'm going to come back to the white because I want to kind of build it. I want to squint my eyes down so I see the big general shape as well. Now, I think what fascinates me about this painting is that it has a low chroma color to it, and it's hard to even say what that is. It feels like an orange, so part of me wants to kind of grab a little bit of orange and get in this little color space and find it. So, there's always the element of exploring the composition, but then there's also exploring of the color. There's never just one kind of concept at work in anything that we're doing. So I'm going to just add a little bit of green here as well. There's a little bit of oil in there, and then just begin to kind of, let's tap it in there, get a little bit of oil, get a little bit of that oil up in there, and we have this beautiful low chroma green orange. And when I see this color, I'm always fascinated because it makes my head spin. So just grab a little bit of the Viridian and tapping it in there, because I'm gonna just get like a little edge there, and I'm doing it with a bigger brush so that I'm kind of forced to shovel it on. And again, if this is something that you find that you have trouble with, like putting paint on, grab a big brush and let's go for it. So I'm gonna just get this in. All right, and then get that there, and then there's space between these over there. Get that as well, and let's just get that in, right? So again, this is something I look at nearly daily. Look at the way that the brush pulls up some of the ground there. What that really does is it makes it so, I'm going to move it over here so it doesn't rattle on the recording. But what it does is it pulls up some of the ground of the, this is actually not white, it's kind of a off-white, gray, warm color. All right, so next what I'm going to do, I actually have flake white on here, or lead white, or Kremnitz white. And what I'm going to do is just grab a touch of that, just to the beauty of using that color is that you can cake it on. It's actually referred sometimes to as silver white, and the beauty of that is that the color kind of goes on. It's never white. There's a difference between lead white and that color. I'm sorry, titanium white and that color, and that's why it's just a big difference when somebody says, I use this over the other thing, or whatever. You don't want to use lead in your paint. That's totally fine, but you're just working with a different set of tools, and you're going to get a different result. So same thing with mineral spirits. I get all the time. I use a lead-free and cadmium-free studio. That's fine, but at the same time, you're just going to get different results as well. So everything should be taken kind of with a grain of salt then. All right, so just going a little darker then. And I remember I have a little bit of Prussian on here, so maybe I'll bring that in, but let's get the green in there. Just going to tap it into the spot, just a big swatch of that color, and load the painting up. I think it was Emil Groupie that said, paint like a millionaire. And he was talking to an audience that, I think for the most part people will not put a lot of paint out, and therefore if you don't have paint out, it means that you're probably timid, but you have to start to make decisions here and try to kind of hit it and hit it right the first time, and not slap it or move it into a space later. Let me get a little bit of just ultra on the palette here, and ultra is just going to make it so that it gets nice blue leaning colors, but I think this is feeling good so far. All right, let's get a little in there and just see what happens. All right, so again, just composition, are you painting flowers? Maybe you want to take one of these, colors, or these study a painting that really relates to what it is that you're working on. I think that's nice, but what I wouldn't do is do a version of that painting. I think I've seen that happen, and I just find it, I don't know, we're like a Google search away from just seeing, I've seen paintings that I'm like, oh, that's pretty fascinating. And before we had Google reverse image searching, I found that, that's awesome. Where do the artists get the idea for that? That seems so original. And then I find that it's the artist, and these are sometimes famous artists, are just doing versions of other people's paintings. And it's very, very common to see that. And now with Google Image Reverse, you can actually find out just who's looking at who. And of course, you can paint similar things, but you can tell when somebody just does a version of somebody else's painting. All right, so just kind of placing the paint on here, kind of tonally building it up, and I'm just gonna corral the painting. Notice I'm washing my brush a lot. I'm just gonna put this down here so it doesn't rattle all that much. And this is really orange down here too, so I'm gonna grab my yellow ochre and bring it up here. But yellow ochre, like these simple kind of mixtures that we think are probably not really, there's a complexity to everything. It's much more, everything is almost much more complex than we think. So I can begin to kind of tap into some of the palette that's already down there. And I think what it does is it also harmonizes. I'm going off of value, of course, because value is really what kind of makes the sense of form. If we want to get these to any of the information to kind of relate in the same have the volume. All right, so let's go over here, and there's a swatch of green there. I'm just gonna tap it up, pull in a little bit of green. It feels like maybe it changes a little bit there. There's also a little bit, I'm just going to leave some of that green on there just to see what happens of the top, a shape right there. All right, and then over here, let's start to grab some of the red, and to be aware of the colors that were around at this time. They really didn't have a lot of the colors that we have now. Let's clean this. Get a drink. All right. This alizarin permanent would not be a color they had access to. They may have been able to get similar results with some colors, but probably not. So I'm going to use it just as like, there's been plenty of times I say to like research the artist if you want to paint like them. And then there's also times where I'm like, well, we don't always have that ability to do. And there's of course built-in value in taking and using your own palette to see if you can translate it over, and then you make the decisions. But really, what I'm always trying to just say is be thoughtful in everything that you're doing, and you make the decisions at the end of the day. It shouldn't be Todd said to do this and you have to do it some certain ways. Like, no, there's always some form of contradiction somewhere where artists are just not using rules. They're just kind of solving it. There's of course value in taking something away from studying and doing their palette, and then using your own palette, and vice versa. And then at the end of the day, it's really up to you, like which way do you want to go in the middle of those two things. And so the final result, of course, also should be you making a decision, not me for you. I don't want to I don't feel comfortable putting sets of rules on people so that they have to think. I mean, the only one I would really say is that you want to try to know your values, but there are times in which I've also not done that. All right. So as we begin, and I'm studying this as well, there's of course a bit of nuance that's happening in this as well, and Maybe there's a touch of blue in there. Again, studying the color for composition and how the artist is pulling that as a narrative through the painting. That should be studied. All right, so let's go this way and get get some of this so that I'm not, doesn't feel like it's kind of floating, you know. So you can scrub it on. You can see that even in the scrubbing, it feels more like when you're studying this artist's work, probably what they were doing. You know, I think a lot of art these days is very flat. I'm actually amazed at how flat it is when I go and see stuff in, like, I don't know if it's the overuse of photography and work, but there just doesn't seem to be what this image right here has. And there's just a depth in it. There's a feeling attached to the objects that are rendered realistically. And it's something that I've just always strived for in my work, and one of the reasons why I'm not all that keen on looking at living artists' work. Some of them, of course, but you know, for the most part, I think there's maybe an influence of photography that's dominated, and I don't find photography all that helpful in painting. Of course, I'm painting from one right now. It can help you, but I think it can also hurt you. And there's contradiction in reading different artists. They all have different opinions on it. And I know James Gurney kind of did a post about it recently on whether or not people were accepting it or rejecting it at the time. So notice the beautiful movement in here of color. And that is intentional. You know, it's not just one, not red. The flowers aren't all red. They're all different colors, and something to just kind of take away. And that's the essence. I mean, even the shot and having the shot be back, if you were to kind of be the audience, this is what you'd be watching. You know, you don't see the details when you're watching somebody paint. You have to take a break and then go up and stare at it. And it's quite fascinating because it really questions, like, well, how much of that has to be accurate and how much is more of the bigger picture and the smaller picture. And it really makes you be aware and think about the big picture and the design of it, because, you know, it's not just rendering the crap out of stuff. It's more about taking and being mindful of the big picture and how to make that work. And then if you can get that and the details to sit in there, then they feel like they're in sync and there's something magical about it. There's also things in which I've seen paintings like Fairfield Porter or Edward Hopper in which the details there is no details, and it doesn't get any better when you get closer. So there's plenty of, it's not so much a rule, but there's plenty of things in which they kind of test that theory of, it's not quite about just the big picture either, but there are artists like that, which are be fantastic to study, that makes you mindful in the creation of this, and you begin to kind of think, where is it that I want to be and how much detail is needed, because there's, just like anything in art, there's different facets that challenge the opinion and ideas that we have. I think that's the wonderful thing about art too, is that it's really kind of always somebody has gone down that road and you can follow them or come to your own conclusions, but they're always something that accepts or tests the theory of it. So it's not like everyone's always right or wrong. It's just like that's where your heart pulls you, and then that's kind of where you take it. So you can hear me cleaning the brush every time here. All right, let's go into here. I think that this color, let's get up here, and I'll come down into here. I think that's too light, so I'm just going to go darker. I don't think that's perfect. I don't know if it quite matters, but again, you know, when I look at this color, I'm always fascinated because I'm like, this is a color I really want to bring into my paintings a bit more. And I think one of them right now, sometimes you go and you study the thing in which you need to go solve for your own painting. And I think that's why it's always an open dialogue between the two. I think those that end studying stop thought in that sense. Like, if you're not always looking and studying, then you're becoming, in my opinion, too complacent with your own work, and it won't evolve. And perhaps that's what you want. I mean, that's totally fine. But I'm always not the same person I was yesterday or last week, and I question the things that I say, and I change my opinions on things. And it's the serpent that cannot shed its skin must perish, as ideas that ceased. The serpent that cannot shed its skin must perish, as ideas that cannot change, they cease to be mind. What he's saying, that's Nietzsche, is just that if you can't change your opinions, then you're stuck by them. And every day you should be testing everything out to see what you think. All right, so it's kind of coming together. Feels like a little lopsided, so I'm just going to fix the drawing, even though I say don't care too much about it. But that's just I wouldn't say the perfectionist, but more of like the structurist in me that's like, you gotta get a little blue over there too. Look at the balance of color. All right, so let's come down here into the bowl, and there's notice that there's red down here on purpose. He put the red down here to balance all these flowers, or she up here, and then now we've got the cad red medium, which feels like orange compared to all that red. And then I'm just going to come down here and pepper it in. And then he's got, or she's got, beautiful orange right in there, red, and then up in here just a flower. And again, I think it's choreographed. I don't think it was just, it just sat in front of me, and now all I have to do is kind of paint it. I think they're a little bit more like the way kind of Mike Klein paints, and Mike Klein's always kind of adjusting and changing and on a path where the painting is kind of leading him to different things. It's not so much just set and now it's just operate. It's more of like testing you out to see every little step of it, if it feels good or not. So, all right, let's grab titanium. Let's grab a little, warm it up. There we go. Pull it in there. Pull that down. Flip color. And again, it doesn't even have to really look exactly like the things. If we get into the details, we're kind of getting away from, what the spirit of this poster study is. We just want to articulate and see it as color, right? So the focus of this week is also color. We're also going to take what we were talking about last time and then put it all together and then begin to think about movement and now color as another component of how it all fits together this way. All right, mix it back up. Again, I like to go back and forth and mix, and mixing makes it, remixing the passages makes it so that I just don't have this wall simple color background. As I definitely have seen some paintings, I think they tend to be a little on the boring side, and I'm looking for depth in the color, like give me something even more than what I see up in front of me. So, all right, a little of the background, I think, it's kind of moving in the right direction, and almost getting there. All right, let's take this, a little green, maybe a little more towards yellow, and then just, not saying that's even perfect, but again, get something down and then tap it where it needs to go. Not exactly, right? But let's get a little bit of white, not too much. Loaded brush, and therefore it's gonna mix, kind of mixing a little on the canvas, but also before, and then it gets darker over here. Right? You look around, you see a lot of the kind of preliminary work of artists too, and I always find it fascinating because they're working out the idea. A good one to look at is Frederick Lord Leighton. Leighton's little study of Flaming Junes is absolutely gorgeous. And you can see that he's being very, pull that over, being very, very open to, it's worked out, but it's not fully worked out in the study. And it's open to kind of change if needed. And you see a little bit of a translation from that to the kind of final. And that's why I say stay open to change an idea, because you want to be like every every sports team goes in with a kind of game plan, but everything about all of football is game time strategy and seeing what the other team, how did they prepare for yours, for the meeting of the minds, and then you're in there kind of making these different strategies based off of what you see. So you can go in and think you're both guessing in that sense of like what the other person's going to do, and therefore it ends up being this kind of face-off. Not a lot of people see that in the game, but if you're versed in it, you know that it's a chess match of like, it's what an audible is in football, that you get up and you kind of see the line up in front of you, and you're reading what they think that you're going to do, and you're trying to now outwit them. And I think most people just see like a bunch of dudes running around playing a sport, but there's much more at play, in which they're very, very mindful of what they're doing, and there's a chess game. All right, so that tips it away from orange, but I ran out of orange, so I'm gonna just come back in. There we go. Right, and then color there. Do this so many times that you feel comfortable. Like if you're watching me do this and you're like, oh, he's just hitting it, like not really, kind of getting close, and then I tap it where it needs to be. But if you can't do it, do this as many times so that you can have the same comfort level as me. And then what that means is just years of practice, and then you get to the point where you're like, that's what I used to do when I used to see Travis paint. Just be like, how the heck am I ever going to get there, or max? And I'm like, well, got to start today, and the journey begins. And I think Pablo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist, said direction is much more important, because it means you're heading somewhere, rather than kind of staying stagnant. So, all right. All right. I don't want to get too much in the details here. It's kind of feels like a bouquet of flowers, which feels good. We'll even that out there. Just get rid of a couple of the spaces in between them. All right. Just going to wrap this up. So there's information over here on the right side. I don't want to get too much into it, but of course it's compositionally part of it, but it's very, very subtle. But it's there for a reason. It's so fascinating. But again, I'm not doing the same size, and let that be its own little lesson, that if you want to do the same size, feel free to do the same size. But if you don't want to, you can still get something out of just even copying a little piece of something, which I've talked about many times in other classes. Just don't come up with excuses on why you can't do something, or like, I need the perfect size, and it's like, I'm not going to paint today because I need to go to the store and buy something. It's like, no, just paint, and if it's the wrong size, who cares? And if you want to do another one the right size, do it next time. But don't let that kind of dictate your enthusiasm to do a copy of the painting. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. Nothing's ever the perfect time for anything. All right, so let's get down here and do some of the dark. Let's put that as a shape. That's an ellipse. If you're not good at drawing ellipses, draw 1,000 more of them. All right, so it definitely leans a little bit more towards the less on the, yeah, maybe in that color right there. Oh, maybe that's too. There we go. It's got the orange. I'm averaging the data because it's almost like impressionism, but that's a wonderful thing. It gives you a base to kind of think out of like how would I do this if I were to just start, and I think just getting something down is worth its weight in gold. So there we go. All right, so then let's tap this in a little bit more just to articulate the shape, and then let's get a little of this, pull it towards green a little bit, yellow, and then just get something down. There we go. Just get that. Not perfect. There we go. I think it was Steinbeck that said, "Now that we don't have to be perfect, we can be good." A quote I think I posted recently, and hopefully that's enlightening. Sometimes I feel like that idea of perfection, I don't know why, but it holds everyone back, and I don't know. I've never wanted to be perfect at anything, or just accepting that, we make the marks that we are, that we make, and there's a individual process in that. All right, this is not perfect. And there's an edge right about here, comes over, and here. And then if I look at this, that just would have to come down a touch. Not a lot. All right, and then there's a little bit of blue. And here, just a touch. And then a wet into wet blue right there. So at the end here, we're going to take and dissect the composition, and then that will be, a learning experience. We recreated it. We're taking a look at the color and why the artist recreated this the way that they did. I highly doubt that it was just there up in front of them and they just copied what they saw. There's many literature that supports that claim too, that it was more than just copying nature as we saw it. I think there's an element of that, but I think that's just a piece of it. So taking the green and the red, putting them together just to see that we get a kind of low chroma color in there. Get that movement, then over. Again, hard because when you get to an edge, everybody, including myself, will run into a problem with having to squish something in to make it fit the composition. All right. And there's definitely a darkerness happening towards the bottom here that frames this up. And then over here, loose. Definitely a green in there too. This is why you get to, it reminds me of a Chardin color.